Hi everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I've got a hot dye bath with a lot of Jacquard's black dye in there. I started off with 12 cups of water, 2/3 of a cup of vinegar to help the dye strike really quickly to another project, and then 1/3 of a cup of the 1% stock solution. Now I quickly dipped some other yarn in this dye, so some of it has been used up, but there's still a lot of dye in here. So I thought it would be fun to do a little bit of an over-dyeing experiment. Right here I have some Knit Picks Gloss DK in Mint. This is a full, like a wound ball of yarn that I've got straight from Knit Picks, and I am going to add this directly to the pot. I have never dyed any silk fibers with the Jacquard acid dyes, but from using food coloring, I know that they require more acid for the dyes to bind in the end, especially the blue food colorings. Now, I'm not sure exactly what will happen when I add this to the pot, but I do know that we will have obviously more color around the outside than the inside, but we should get a really fun asymmetric yarn. And also, this ball of yarn is currently dry, so there's a lot that can go on. But I am now going to plop it in the pot and use a slotted spoon to submerge it. Woohoo, there is, and we should also get some really cool things because the fibers are still dry. So I'm just holding this a little below the surface. This ball of yarn is 50 grams, and it is 70% merino wool, 30% silk. Okay, so we now have it such that the ball of yarn is beneath the surface, mostly, of our pot. I am going to actually raise the heat a tiny bit, but let's go ahead and let this sit for, say, 10 minutes and see what happens. The heat is on low. We had started really bubbling, so I reduced it. You can see that the dye bath is starting to clear because we can now see the bottom of the pot, which we couldn't before. I am going to leave the heat on, I think, for 10 more minutes, and then we will, I guess, come and take another look. After 20 minutes, most of the color has cleared. I am going to now turn off the heat and let this cool in the pot a little bit. It's possible we'll absorb a tiny bit more color, but maybe not. But in a little bit, we will remove our ball of yarn from the pot. All right, the dye bath is still warm because it's steamy, but most of the dye is in our yarn. And ooh, you can see some of the color variation already from just me picking up this ball of yarn and sort of collapsing it into a little mess. But I am going to let this cool and then we will try to wash it. We can see a hint of color coming through. I am really curious how this will turn out. Now, normally I will just sort of let these dry for a little while before unraveling them and washing them further. But I do want to wash it a bit right away, just in case there's a little extra dye that's in here. But at first glance, things look okay. I'm not going to use any soap yet. Mainly, I'm squeezing it, mainly because I just want to be able to get any excess dye out. And if there's not heavy bleeding, then I'm not going to worry about it a ton, but I want it to be sort of situated for me to unravel it. Yeah, but the fact that nothing is coming out means that we can let this dry a little bit and then maybe tomorrow attempt to unravel it. So, eek! You see that I just squeezed it a little bit, but I'm now gonna go place this on my drying rack to dry a bit. I let this ball of yarn dry overnight, and now I'm gonna wind it onto a niddy noddy so we can wash it properly and see what our gradient will look like. I am going to unwind the ball off camera. This gradient is so cool. And I'm going to need to go find another ball of the mint gloss yarn to compare this to in the end, because it's really not looking minty anymore. The paler colors do look gray, a cool gray with some of the blue in it, but yeah, it feels like it took, you know, a reasonable amount of dye up all over. Now that we have unwound the yarn onto the niddy noddy, we need to wash it again. While the yarn was still in ball form, I wasn't able to thoroughly wash it. I could rinse it out a little bit, but there were still some areas that were not really accessible, and I risked really tangling the yarn if I were to wash it too much then. So now we will go properly wash our gorgeous gradient. This yarn is beautiful. And now I'm going to place it in some water to wash it. I wonder if we would have gotten maybe less color penetration of the black dye if we were using something that was not a silk blend. I have found in the past with food coloring that silk fibers slow down the absorption of the color a lot. I'm now going to use a tiny bit of dish soap. Commercial acid dyes, you know, use the same mechanism to add color to yarn as food coloring. So it would stand to reason that you would also get similar slow color absorption with those dyes. But I did have an awfully lot of acid in this pot. Anyway, I am going to continue to rinse this until all the soap is out, and then we will hang it up to dry. We started this video with a ball of gloss DK yarn in the color mint. And then we put this intact ball of yarn into a pot of Jacquard Jet Black acid dye. And the resulting yarn has these black and gray tones. When we compare it to what the original yarn looked like, it's really hard to see the mint in the final yarn. All of the yarn took up at least a tiny amount of color. Even though the mint tone has shifted more gray in our finished dyed yarn, I think that it's fun to use these commercial balls as a vessel for dyeing, because we have this really fun gradient, this really fun unique gradient now. If you were to take two commercially wound balls of yarn and add them into the pot in the same way, you could end up with very similar colorways. They wouldn't necessarily be exact, but the commercially wound balls probably have a similar tension. So I would expect similar levels of dye penetration through to the center. So this would be good for, you know, if you wanted to alternate balls of yarn like I did with the Denise shawl to take advantage of your gradient. But there is potential to get multiple balls of yarn with a similar colorway using this kind of technique. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and if you enjoyed this dyeing video, head over to the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel and check out the Dyepot Weekly series. I love to experiment with different ways to apply dyes to fiber and to create fun colors. While you're at it, subscribe to the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel. And if you want to support ChemKnits on a more personal level, check out the ChemKnits Patreon. You'll find a link in the video description. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day!